Hi, folks who are sending in. We're going to get started in just a moment. Thank you for being here tonight. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Terra Lawson-Remer, and I am proud to serve as chair of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. I want to just begin by welcoming you all here tonight. We all have a lot of places we could be, and it's really noticed and appreciated that you've decided to join our panel this evening. Um, this webinar is on the consumer protection and affordability challenges that we all face, and then, really specifically what San Diego County, following the example of other local governments across the country, is doing to meet this moment. So, just so y'all who are joining tonight have a sense of what this event is going to look like, I'm going to be introducing our world-class panel in a minute, and then I'll kick things off with an opening question that each panelist will be able to respond to. And then we're going to move into our question and answers. And that's really a chance for you all to ask questions and hopefully get a number of those answered. So those are going to, the way that's going to work is you're going to submit questions, um, and you can submit those through the chat. And you also have had the opportunity to pre-submit questions prior to this event. I know we had emailed out a link and a form with a opportunity to pre-submit questions, so I do have those already. But you're welcome to also start submitting your questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Again, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you can't see it, there's an options button. You press the options button and it should have that Q&A button. So if you forgot to submit your questions in advance or something occurs to you in the course of the conversation, please do submit something. So before I get to our panel and introduce the amazing folks joining us tonight, I do just want to take a minute to kind of set the table of what we're doing here this evening, which it's talking about something I've been hearing across San Diego County and frankly across the country. Something that people are dealing with day in and day right now, day in and day out right now. And so tonight we're going to hear from leading voices in consumer protection and public enforcement about what's happening nationally, what they're seeing on the ground, and why local governments are across the country are stepping up to fill gaps. People fundamentally are just feeling really squeezed. I think we're all paying more, we're getting less, and we're increasingly wondering whether anyone is out there fighting for just the consumers and the day-to-day working person, and whether anyone is enforcing the rules. And rising costs, we know, have many causes, but some of the pressure families feel comes from hidden fees on your phone bill, your rent, your airline tickets. Some of these pressures come from health insurance companies that are denying legitimate claims. I think the terror that folks have felt from aggressive debt collection agencies, from landlords who are driving rents higher in illegal ways, and from pollution that raises medical bills and lowers property values. All of these practices on the surface may seem separate, but together they're really an invisible tax. It's an unfairness tax. That makes living in San Diego so much more expensive. And it doesn't help us solve any of our problems, but it makes it so hard for all of us to live here. Seniors on fixed incomes lose hundreds of dollars to junk fees and overdraft charges. I've heard stories from service members who've been steered into abusive loans. I've heard stories from families who've taken on medical debt when insurers delay or deny care that they are legally entitled to, or even worse, sometimes not seeking the care that they need, and their family members to get sicker and sicker, or even sometimes die because they're so afraid of ending up in debt. because of some aggressive insurance scams. And at the same time, I know that most of the businesses in our community are honest businesses, led by hardworking people who are playing by the rules, who are trying to do right by our community. And these honest businesses are undercut by these cheating competitors. So it doesn't only hurt consumers, it hurts our entire business economy, our entire local economy when you have a bunch of fraud, a bunch of scams, a bunch of cheating. Um, Unfortunately, these harms, they're not random and not accidental because we do know that after the 2008 financial crisis, Congress created a federal watchdog agency to prevent exactly this kind of corporate abuse. This was called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it was built to stand up to giant predatory banks and big lenders so families would never again be left holding the bag while corporations and mega lenders walked away with massive profits. But really tragically, President Trump has now dismantled the vast majority of those protections. He's gutted the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau I just was talking about. He's slow walking investigations, dropped enforcement actions against companies engaged in junk fees, predatory lending, financial misconduct. So all the folks who have been working for the last 15 years to try to keep us safe from these kinds of instances of fraud and abuse really have been, a lot of them have been fired and are no longer able to do their jobs. So when this kind of federal oversight disappears, the consequences are felt all over. They reverberate not just nationwide, but frankly, globally, because the US is such an important global player. So that's really what we're trying to do and what we're trying to engage on here with standing up our own CFPP here in San Diego County, because we know that laws to stop these kinds of fraudulent and abusive practices already exist, but what's missing is significant enforcement. In California, we do have the state AG, and I so love what they do, so appreciate everything they fight for us. But in addition to prioritizing start large statewide cases, they're also pretty busy right now suing our president. We also have our San Diego District Attorney's Office, who does really critical, pretty phenomenal work, especially on serious criminal matters. And they've been really taking on a lot. But there's just so much to be done. And at the same time, our city attorneys, like the city of San Diego, and our local legal aid organizations like Legal Aid are also working hard, but are, mostly frankly at capacity. Um, at the same time, this corporate malfeasance has grown and grown more sophisticated, especially with AI and a lot of AI generated scams, hidden arbitration clauses, shell companies, and more. So this harm continues, and that's where our county comes in. In 2021, California passed a bill called SB 461. This is really critical to the conversation we're having today because SB 461 gave large counties like the County of San Diego the authority to bring civil enforcement actions on behalf of the people. And this is different than a criminal investigation. It is a civil enforcement action seeking civil judgments, usually some kind of pretty significant financial penalties and financial deterrence. Um, Los Angeles has launched a unit under this authority. Santa Clara has launched a unit under this authority. And San Diego is now the only major county in the state of California that has not yet stepped forward into this role. So this is about to change. That's why I've been working on putting together a CFPP. We are proposing the creation of a consumer fairness and public protection unit within our county council's office at the County of San Diego. Its role is going to be to enforce laws that are already in the books, stop ongoing illegal practices, recover money for residents who are harmed, and most importantly, by winning serious judgments and significant judgments, deter repeat future misconduct. This is a civil enforcement, let me say that again, not criminal prosecution, and it does not create new regulations. It does not expand criminal law. It essentially uses existing law stuff we already all know is bad and shady, um, and applies these rules evenly and holds bad actors accountable. So before turning to our panel, I do want to address a question that I've definitely gotten from lots of San Diegans because I think everyone's well aware we're facing a pretty significant budget crisis in the city, in the county of San Diego, given all the federal cuts that we're grappling with. So, how are we going to pay for this CFPP? What's really pretty awesome is that this unit is going to be launched using existing funds. These funds exist already. We already have them, and they're restricted to being only used for consumer protection. These are called restricted consumer protection settlement funds. So we've already secured all these funds in prior lawsuits against corporations that broke the law. And these dollars were recovered specifically to be spent on consumer protection and enforcement. So over time, as we continue to do the work, the penalties and recoveries from cases the unit takes on will also help sustain the work. So this is really great because it means that we have already a dedicated funding source, and it's not going to impact in any way other county programs. It's just additive to the work that we're already doing. We're really funding more accountability through prior accountability. And this unit's going to focus directly on issues here in San Diego County, such as, top of everyone's mind, I think every single day is environmental pollution affecting the Tijuana River Valley. The PFAS contamination, if you're not aware of PFAS contamination, these are forever chemicals that producers dumped in the water knowing it was harmful, and they stay there forever, and the little plastics get in your body and they end up in your cells. Bad faith health insurance practices. I hear about these every single day from constituents, kind of the problems we all have with insurance companies, with health insurance companies, predatory lending, unlawful debt collection, and harassment and tenant fraud. So these are really critical debates that determine whether families stay housed, whether small businesses can compete fairly, and whether people can afford to remain in San Diego County. Um, so we're really focused on stopping this harm early and preventing this cycle. Across the country, cities and counties are stepping into enforcement roles that were once primarily handled at the federal level, because, as I said, there's been a huge vacuum left in protecting our community by the cuts that we've seen in Washington. So, to put all of this in context, and I know that was a lot, but this is a big idea, and I think we need a big idea to meet the moment the crisis that we're in today. I've brought together leading voices in consumer protection and public enforcement, and the folks assembled today are deeply embedded in this work, and they're here to help everyone really kind of think through and understand what's broken and why local governments are building this CFPP capacity ourselves. So I'm going to briefly introduce each of them, and then I'm going to kick things off with my first question. So Shennan Kavanagh, thank you for being here, Shennan. I so appreciate it. She's the director of litigation at the National Consumer Law Center. She leads class actions and impact litigation to advance economic justice for low-income consumers. And before that, she served as chief of the Consumer Protection Division at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, following 6 years as deputy chief. We've got also here today Kant Desai. He's the senior principal at the CFE Fund. He oversees policy strategy and consumer financial protection, including municipal financial empowerment. And he previously served as chief of policy for Chicago City Treasurer Stephanie Neely, where he launched the city's first Office of Financial Inclusion. And prior to that, he was an economist at RCF Economic Consulting, where he focused on energy, environmental, and urban policy research. And then we also have today with us Mike Webb. He's the Western States Public Policy Director for Singleton and Schreiber. And he's has more than 15 years of experience and he's previously worked in the Washington State's Attorney General's office, including nearly 8 years as chief of staff, working on many, many areas, including civil rights, immigration, voter access, consumer protection, antitrust, and workers' rights. Um, and then we will have joining us shortly. He's still teaching class, but he's about to finish his class and sign on to the webinar is Ted Mermin. He's the executive director of the Berkeley Center for Consumer Law and Economic Justice, which he's led since it was founded in 2018. And under his direction, the center has launched major national and regional convenings, including the Consumer Law Scholars Conference, the Economic Justice Policy Advocates, and he co-founded the growing Consumer Law Advocate Students and Scholars Network. And he also directs the California Low Income Consumer Coalition and serves as executive director of the Public Good Law Center. And let me say to Ted, who's not here, I was once an academic and wore that many hats. It's very tiring. Thank you very much for wearing so many hats. So before we kick off, just a couple ground rules. Everyone, please be respectful as people have different experiences and viewpoints. As mentioned at the top, please submit your questions to the Q&A button near the bottom of the screen. And unfortunately, Zoom does not let you know if your question was sent, but unless your, computer has shut down and you're having major technical difficulties on your end, you can feel very confident that the question has been received. So if we don't get to your question tonight, I just want to let you know I appreciate it. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your questions. This has been a really iterative process in putting together this proposal, and some of the best ideas have come in response to questions that we've gotten at town halls and sort of in other dialogues. So don't be surprised if your question somehow shows up as ideas or edits or sort of a focus of how the CFPP ends up um, being implemented as things move forward. So, okay, let me just begin and jump off with our first question for our panelists. Um, and I'll start with Mike. From your vantage point, where are the biggest gaps between the protections people assume exist and what's actually happening on the ground? And why does local civil enforcement matter in this moment? Um, yeah, kick us off.
Well, Supervisor, thank you so much for that question. Thanks for allowing me to be here. Like you said, this is a big idea you're working on, and it is a great idea. I think that what people the biggest problem we have is not a lack of laws to protect folks, but a lack of enforcement and enforcement resources to enforce those laws. You hit on it exactly, Supervisor. There has been a systemic and relentless attempt to gut and to neuter the federal agencies that protect us from getting scammed and ripped off and discriminated against, whether that's the FTC or the CFPB or the EPA that's protecting our clean air and clean water, or the Civil Rights Division, the Department of Justice. All these agencies are far less robust than they were a couple years ago. And even a couple years ago, there weren't enough resources at the federal, state, and local governments to to protect folks from all the ways that makes their lives can make their lives more expensive and less fair. And you hit on. I thought the unfairness tax is a phenomenal frame. That's exactly what it is. If you are paying a subscription service and you try to cancel it, but they charge you another month or two, and hey, the $20 or $40, you're busy. It seems like it's just one more thing. You say, you roll your eyes, you're frustrated, and you decide just to eat it. That's just one thing that's making your lives more expensive. And then there's large costs too, paying an automobile that doesn't, you drive it off the lot, a used car that breaks down. There's so many ways in which um, either scams or corporations are treating folks unfairly in ways that is making their lives less affordable, more expensive, and creating an unlevel playing field that is making the businesses playing by the rules at putting them at a competitive disadvantage. And the experience I bring to this is, when I was in the Washington State Attorney General's office, I had the privilege and honor of partnering with Attorney General Ferguson to create and to expand an affirmative litigation work and create a civil rights division and create a complex litigation division and an environmental protection division. None of them funded by taxpayer resources, all funded by the bad actors of the folks that we successfully took to court and made pay for their conduct and hold them accountable. So look forward to talking about this. Thanks so much for setting this table and laying the groundwork so nicely for this really great idea.
Thank you, Mike. Shannon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it is just a thrill to hear about your setting up this extremely important unit. There can't be, there can never be enough enforcement units, private attorneys, legal services organizations, cities, towns, states doing consumer protection, both, with the gaps in federal enforcement, but even absent the gaps in federal enforcement. Because the big thing I want to point out when you're asking about like what the laws provide for consumer protections and what protections, what surprises people when they're not able to access those protections. Having been both in public enforcement and the private bar doing consumer finance litigation for my entire career, we have different tools in our toolbox. Even though it's all consumer finance litigation and enforcement, there's things that local governments, state governments, federal governments can do that the private bar can't. And one of the biggest gaps between, for access to justice for consumers are arbitration clauses, by way of example. So most every consumer contract that people sign is going to contain an arbitration clause, with some exceptions, like for mortgage loans. And if you sign an arbitration clause, you are giving up your right to go into court, and to have a jury trial. Also, you may sign class action waivers where you give up your right to proceed in a class action on behalf of a group of people. But in a public enforcement capacity, because the case is being brought on behalf of the county or the city or the state or the federal government, they're not a contracting party to those consumer contracts, so they don't have to challenge arbitration clauses or face the barrier to access to justice because of the existence of an arbitration clause. And that's one real huge piece of the puzzle where more local and state enforcement is essential because the private bar, whether you're in legal services or a nonprofit like I am now, or in a private firm, aren't necessarily able to take all of those cases. Another gap, I think, is just pure information about how the system works. So often, low-income consumers get sued by companies in debt collection or in eviction actions or small claims court. And, there's just not the same balance of information about how these systems work and being able to access attorneys that can help navigate the system, especially, in a short turnaround time. And oftentimes people end up just not going to court because they don't understand, what to do when they get there, or the letters that they're getting in the mail. Oftentimes there's language access barriers or other reasons why folks might feel uncomfortable showing up in a court setting. And local governments can really work closely with their court systems to provide avenues for access to justice in a variety of ways, whether it's, getting information out there, make sure you show up to your debt collection hearing so you don't get a default judgment. This is what you can expect in an eviction hearing, promoting remote access, to courts for low-income consumers or others that just might have trouble, taking time off during their day to show up at hearings. And local, enforcement agencies are really in the best position to work with the courts on the ground on some of those access to justice issues. So those are just two big examples, to answer your question about the laws exist, but where does the gap come in that prevents people from being able to be protected or avail themselves of those laws?
Thank you. I really appreciate particular point about the arbitration clauses, because I think all of us have signed those, and you don't really have another choice if you want the service being offered. So to know that there's sort of possibility that the county can stand up and fight back against systemic abuse, even when there are such clauses, that's a really big, I think, a really big advantage of moving this initiative forward. So thank you. Okay, Kant Desai.
Hi, it's Kant, by the way.
Kant. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kant.
Well, first, let me just say thank you for inviting me to join this webinar. This is really exciting for us from the CFE Fund that you guys are embarking on this work. And we come from this work from a slightly different angle. And as you shared in my bio, I'm not a lawyer. Um, but we came to this work from the angle of our work to help cities and counties around the country. We worked in over 150 cities and counties around the country, helping them build strategies around helping people build financial stability and wealth and economic mobility opportunities. And time and again, we saw that the people that we're trying to help the most are often the most undermined by predatory, deceptive, and unfair business practices. And what we see is that local governments aren't or often not in a position or not sort of capable of actually sort of filling a void that existed, because often the situations were maybe too small for an AG or for the federal government to sort of intervene. And so for us, that really drove our mission to say, well, we need to rebuild what once existed was a powerful complementary consumer protection function at the local government level. And when we started doing this work about 10 years ago, one interesting fun fact I learned was that in 1974, there was a survey done by the Nixon White House about local consumer protection. And at that time, they found that over 180 cities and counties had active consumer affairs or consumer protection agencies. And by my last count, there's about 18 right now. So the whole sort of apparatus of local government playing a powerful role in protecting consumers was been degraded a lot over the last several decades. And so our motivation is to rebuild that, because it's a missing piece in the ability for people to sort of build financial stability in their lives, which is our mission. And so we started doing this work and recognizing that part of, to your point, was that a lot of these laws still exist from the 70s and a lot of municipal codes and county codes, but the function and the capability to deploy them and implement them has been lost. And so so again, kudos to you for stepping up and recognizing that this is a missing piece, and that city and counties have real power to be making a difference in people's lives. And I'll just end with last about 3 weeks ago, we had our 5th national convening on local consumer protection. And this one was the first where we focused on affirmative litigation as a critical tool for local governments. And one of the things that was so exciting was to see how much energy people felt because of what's been happening in the federal government level, to see that there's something that cities and counties can be doing to step up and fill the void and address issues that have been affecting everyday people in their communities. And to be able to say, I actually have a powerful tool that I can go after that big business that might be affecting all of our city, or, maybe a smaller actor that is, a debt management company that's going and screwing a bunch of people, like, getting him into sort of, subscription traps and things like that. So the recognition that there is power there has been really cool to see. And now you are now part of a really growing movement. Just in the last week, I've heard from 3 to 4 counties that have said, hey, I think we want to build an Office of Consumer Protection. Turns out we have the ability to directly enforce the state's UDAP. Or how do we get started? And I can now say, like, well, there's more and more people you can talk to. And this is not just in red states not just in blue states. These are red states like Kansas and blue cities and red states and all over. So I think people are recognizing the idea that a basic fairness and transparency in a marketplace is not a partisan issue. It's just, we don't want people to get screwed. And now we have a tool to help push back against growing corporate power, and which results in these kinds of predatory traps. And so again, really excited for you all to be moving in this direction, and happy to help however we can.
Thank you. And I just want to echo that. I agree. This is absolutely not a partisan issue. I mean, basic fairness, the idea that people should not be getting screwed and that when companies should play by the rules and, people should be treated fairly. And I think that's a really core principle of how our economy should work. So, Ted, welcome. I had already given you an introduction, and especially the fact that as an academic, you wear many, many hats and you're coming from class. So we're so happy to have you. So let me ask you the question that everyone just answered and give you an opportunity. The question is from your vantage point, where are the biggest gaps between the protections people assume exist and what's actually happening on the ground? And why does local civil enforcement matter in this moment?
Well, I run the risk of repeating things other people have said. And if you hear me start down that path, please just jump in the way. Um, I'll just go right to the heart of it. People think that they are being protected from large, for example, financial predators right now, or businesses that are taking advantage of them. Surely there's a law against that, and surely the federal government will do something to protect us. Um, and the problem with that statement is, and it's something that was underscored in 3 hours of testimony in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals yesterday, the Trump administration has done its best to completely shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, just to name one agency that has gone silent. Why does it matter directly? Well, the the CFPB in the course of the last year has dropped 42 public enforcement actions. They include a bank accused of cheating consumers out of more than $2 billion in interest payments, a well-known peer-to-peer payment system that involved a claim of $900 million in fraud losses as a result of shoddy safeguards, a student loan collection outfit that involved deceptive and unfair debt collection practices for private student loans, which was already settled for $2.25 million. And the Bureau went in to try to reopen the case so that they could dismiss it and eliminate the settlement. A mortgage company in Chicago that not only made no loans to Black families, but also made thinly veiled racist remarks on a company-sponsored radio show. The CFPB had sued. It had ultimately settled with the company, and the acting director of the CFPB ordered the Bureau to try to go into court and undo the settlement, announcing that the problem was that the CFPB itself had spent years persecuting and extorting the company. We were lucky there and that the court refused. Those are the kinds of things that are going on in our country right now. There is at least a vacuum and maybe something worse at the federal level. And it is left in large part to the states to do something about this. Every state has an attorney general's office, and certainly they are working and working hard. But even there, you just do not have the same kind of personnel that is available elsewhere. Just to put a little bit of a number on it, the number of public prosecutors in the state attorney general's office, plus probably the DAs and county council, city attorneys who are bringing consumer protection cases against corporations that engage in fraud and predatory practices is going to number in the dozens. The number of attorneys who defend the companies engaging in those practices numbers in the thousands. It is not a fair fight. And we consumers, and we are all consumers, are the ones who are left out and are left unprotected. And if San Diego can bring another 10 lawyers and another 10 investigators into the fray, that's just going to be a significant contribution to a fight that needs to happen and that is essential to all of us. So enormous thanks for leading this effort.
Talking. Sorry, I was talking and I was on mute. I said thank you so much. And you, I think, really uplifted the form of what we're bringing forward, which is we're looking to, as quickly as possible, staff up. We're looking to, have at least 20 personnel, 20 people working in this unit, and at least 10 lawyers and 10 investigators kind of off the bat. So really trying to create a really robust and effective unit here in San Diego County. Let me ask the first follow-up question, directing it at Ted, actually. I think you just had a pretty outrageous list of the kinds of investigations and litigation that I think we would all agree should be being brought to protect all of us and to just sort of fight for basic fairness and decency in our society. Um, would love to hear from your perspective how a county unit could kind of engage in some of these kinds of cases with Trump kind of intentionally and deliberately gutting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect his cronies.
Well, I mean, in many of these cases, uh, well, it is and it remains possible within the statute of limitations for a different prosecutor to come in and bring the same case. And it may be geographically different somewhat when you're talking about a federal agency versus a local one or a state one. But the fact is that the wrongs were still wrong. The CFPB has written the blueprint of how to proceed, and prosecutors can pick this up. And some have. There are instances where they had brought the initial prosecution with the CFPB. The CFPB dropped it, and the states that had brought it with them have picked it, have continued with the prosecution. There are some where the CFPB dropped it, and a state came in and said, "You may have dropped it. You may have thought that this isn't worth pursuing, but we think it is," and just started again. Uh, Difficult, more difficult because of the statute of limitations, but still an essential thing to be doing going forward. I think that a robust, energetic, aggressive, local entity can do a great deal. There is people may or may not remember that as part of the tobacco settlement in the late 1990s, well, there were 49 states involved in it and one city and county. That was San Francisco, showing what could be done at the local level. And I think that we have every reason to follow that example, every reason to believe that there are really impressive things which can be done by counties in this state. And we look forward to seeing them.
Thank you. If it just open it up to Mike, Shennan, or Kant, if any of you
Yeah,
would
I
like
was
to
just going
take
to
a
add
stab.
that some of the interesting ones that cities and counties have already started doing is Baltimore, for example, who, starting with 1.5 lawyers, went down, acquired their own UDEB authority, and began to sue opioid manufacturers and not going with the larger settlement. And they've now settled for close to $600 million in restitution. Since then, they added 5 more lawyers and they've sued 4 fintech companies and a sports betting company for deceptive practices, all in the last year. And so, like, what's amazing is that they've been able to develop a model of recognizing how powerful their law can be, identifying people who've been harmed and targeting those companies that are very pervasive. And those are the kinds of cases that actually can be replicated in other places. Because if it's happening in Baltimore, it's happening in lots of other places. Similarly, with some of the gig companies like Grubhub and Uber Eats and things, we had a litigation here in Chicago that now has been replicated by a few other places. So there's those opportunities too to sort of look at what some of the other prosecutions that have happened and identify whether those are things that you could by doing locally, even just to help you get started.
Thank you.
I agree
Yeah.
with all of that. And if I can just add into that, even if with respect to the specific CFPB enforcement actions that were dismissed, if there's reasons that those particular targets are not amenable to follow-on enforcement actions for whatever reason. The conduct is stale or they've gone out of business. There's still entire industries that are built on similar business models that are doing similar practices. Like we all know junk fees cuts across many different industries. It takes many different forms, but the principles are the same. The laws are the same that you would bring to, enforce against those types of issues. And all of that is important in order to impact not even just a particular company in a particular case, but industry-wide practices and local enforcement units can move quickly to do things like get good cases on the book, get good jurisprudence, uncover certain practices in addition, to going after particular targets as well. So there's economies of scale to be had, which is why there's never-ending cases. The laws do exist, but there's never-ending opportunities to be enforcing those laws across industries.
Thank you. Mike.
I will add, those are such phenomenal questions. The only thing I will add is just to contextualize, I think, both on how bad it is that the CFPB is doing the conduct that Ted described, but also the benefits of other governments stepping in with enforcement actions. We're not just talking about, hey, these are entities that did a bad thing, and so somebody needs to hold them accountable because the CFPB isn't. They need to be held to account and for their conduct. We're talking about in many, if not most of the cases that Ted talked about, we're talking about restitution cases. That word was used. And that means that, a consumer, everyone listening to this panel is a consumer. You spend money, you're a consumer. You are entitled. You were ripped off. You paid money that you shouldn't have paid. You paid for a service and that service was not delivered to you in the way that it was promised. And that means that you're entitled to money back. And so the idea is it's not just that these companies aren't being held accountable when these enforcement actions are dropped. It's that individuals who were harmed, who were economically harmed, are not getting the money back into their pockets, their wallets, their bank accounts, to which they are entitled. And so that is sort of what we're talking about here. It's holding bad actors accountable. I think everyone agrees is a good thing. It is, in court orders, injunctive relief, or court orders telling folks, stop doing this bad conduct that you've been doing. Stop these hidden fees. Stop these junk fees. Stop these bad practices. And it's also restitution, which is just a fancy way of saying money back to you, to the people who are harmed. They get their money back. They can spend it on their family and their loved ones and their lives. And so that's what's at stake. And that's why it's so important that we do have robust enforcement of these civil laws.
Thank you. Appreciate all these answers. I do want to kind of take a moment to uplift, over the last couple of years since I was elected, I've asked our county council to explore affirmative litigation. And I think bringing forward those cases has certainly laid the groundwork for our current launch of this Consumer Financial and Public Protection Unit. Because we now know that we can bring these cases and we have a little bit of that experience, but it's been initiated primarily out of my board office. So, we brought a board action to sue ghost gun manufacturers because they had basically a machine that prints, it's a 3D printer that prints guns in your basement. And that's illegal. And it was called the Ghost Gunner, and they renamed it like the Wave Runner or some ridiculous name, but it's the same machine. So we're suing them and trying to hold them accountable. We're looking at a lawsuit against some of these huge social media companies who we know are responsible for a lot of the mental health issues. And, with the county, we're responsible for behavioral health. I mean, that's what we do. And we have to deal every single day with sort of the costs associated with, the spiraling mental health crisis of young people in our community. So, we have been looking at what we can do on that. And so it's definitely been, and there's other cases as well, but it's definitely been the experience of the last couple of years of saying, hey, we can do more as a county But again, these cases have all just come essentially from me and my team, and I think it would be significantly more effective to have a really powerful team of attorneys who can kind of think about this and build on best practices and look what's going on across the country and look for opportunities to help most directly help people in our community who are being negatively impacted by a lot of these really scams and predatory practices. So thank you. Um, okay, so there's a couple questions that we've gotten from folks in the chat. Okay, so just to kick us off with an issue that has actually come up many, many times. It's pretty, I've heard this a lot, and this is about the Tijuana River Valley. And the core question is, it says, I live near the Tijuana River Valley. We've been told for years that pollution is really complicated with all these federal, international, etc. agencies, but our community is still suffering and breathing. From your experience, what, if anything, could local civil enforcement do to help? It's a pretty big question. Anyone wants to take a stab at that? Mike.
I'll take the first crack at it, which is just to um, one, just to say that environmental enforcement is so critical, and um, and everything that we've been talking about the CFPB, similar. There's been similar patterns with the EPA, the federal EPA, and federal EPA's enforcement, and they're, in fact, they're they're no longer prioritizing environmental enforcement. I will say that the some of our landmark environmental laws in our country, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, have a citizen suit, and that the courts have held that government agencies, enforcement agencies, can take advantage of those citizen suits and bring actions on behalf of the people to say that, hey, to try to remediate, which is a fancy lawyer's way of saying fix, to clean up the harm that was done. And so that is just a tool in the tool belt of government enforcement agencies that have the resources to take on large polluters. And that is one more thing that a robust, strong local consumer fairness, affirmative litigation unit can do.
So also you can use consumer protection statutes sometimes to go after that kind of conduct. And just by way of example, when I was at the Mass Attorney General's office, we sued Exxon under the Massachusetts Consumer Protection Statute for materially misrepresenting the environmental benefits of its new gasoline product and for greenwashing. And several other state attorney generals' offices did as well. And I believe also the city of Baltimore brought a similar suit, and maybe a couple of other cities as well. So, depending on, the consumer protection statute you're looking at, that's another way to hold polluters, accountable.
Thank you. Okay, there's another question in the chat. It says, isn't this duplicative of its district attorneys or state attorney generals or federal regulators? Based on what you've seen nationally, what's missing, especially given that we already have a city attorney in San Diego, a district attorney, and a state attorney general?
It's not duplicative if people are collaborating closely, which I know your office has been doing, reaching out and talking to people not only locally or in the state of California, but across the country. But also, our side is always going to be under-resourced. Economies of scale and collaboration are essential. I don't think it's ever going to be a situation of a numbers game where there's just so many people that are doing the enforcement work that it's just going to overlap substantially. I think it just everybody wants to make sure they understand what their particular tools in the toolbox are and how that can come together across the entire bar in order to be as effective as possible.
Any other thoughts from anybody?
Just to add color, when I was in the Washington Attorney General's office and we went to trial against the largest opioid distributors in the country, like Shennan says, like there were literally 100 attorneys that they flew in against our team, and they took up 4 floors of a large downtown hotel room where nothing but attorneys for these opioid distributors. So, yeah, this like I said, our side, well, the folks fighting for the people are always going to be under resourced. So I don't think that's not a concern. And it's similar to what we have in our criminal structure. You're going to have a city police department. You'll have a county sheriff's office. You'll have federal law enforcement at the FBI. So it's as long as there's collaboration, it's not redundancy. It's more folks that are fighting for the people.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. If no one else has a thought on that, I'll go to another audience question. It says, I have been defrauded and lost $20,000. Is there anything I can do besides file a police report and a fraud claim? Anyone what's it? Any thoughts? Ted?
Sure. I mean, there are some remarkable legal services that depends to some degree on your income or your age. There are various agencies around San Diego that serve different populations. But if Legal Aid Society of San Diego, Elder Law and Advocacy, you've got some remarkable uh, uh, institutions there who can help people. And, you just have to call them up and ask for an intake and an interview. The local bar association is also available to help you find a private attorney if that's possible. And I think that the legal aid providers will be able to do that as well. So the most important thing, don't give up. Keep calling around and asking until you find someone who can help you.
Thank you. Okay. What's the sound? This feels like a really friendly question that someone put in the chat. So I'm not gonna lie, I like this question. Thank you, whoever put this in the chat. It says, what's one myth about consumer protection or civil enforcement you'd most want to dispel for policymakers and the public? I feel like that was a reporter or someone. Uh,
Well,
Well,
there's
I,
a number
oh,
of
go
ways to
ahead.
answer this. Can't go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would say one of the main ones is that we often encounter in new places that we're working is the belief that somehow consumer protection work is anti-business. And that is a huge myth. And I think you addressed it a little bit in your opening comments, that this isn't about penalizing business as a whole or small business or picking on little guys, but this is about creating a fair marketplace, not only for consumers, but also for businesses that are acting well. And in a one of the I and so that's one myth that I think is important to sort of dispel, is that this is about just ensuring that there is a level playing field for everybody, because what you see in the marketplace is people who are trying to take advantage of the system and people's trust, and this is an issue that we want to address.
That's a great one. The other one I'll say is that it's expensive. I think it's sort of lumped in with, it's expensive government regulation. And, what we were talking about is civil enforcement of our laws that is self-funded by recoveries by folks who break the laws. So, I mean, in Washington State, we took our affirmative litigation work, went from 20 attorneys to 120 over 12 years. So like a six-fold increase. No taxpayer dollars went into that. In fact, we were able to return about $1 billion to government and about $1 billion back to people in the form of, actually checks, restitution, or debt relief. And so it is a very unique thing. Consumer protection is a unique thing in government. One of the rarest things in government is a revenue generating body of work that, if successful, you are both holding people accountable, putting money in people's pockets, and it's self-sustaining through enforcement actions.
Those are both good ones. I think I've encountered both of those myths in the last year as I've tried to put this together. So I very much appreciate that. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Um, okay. So this little bit incoherently written, let me try to kind of summarize or paraphrase. It says, you all are saying the Trump administration is dismantling the CFPB and stopping their fighting for working people. That seems biased. If this is pro-business, why would they do that?
I wish I could say it was biased or a myth. It's true. The members of the current administration have said that they want to shut down the CFPB. Um, you may disagree with what the CFPB has done in particular cases, but do you really want to take off the beat the cop that is making sure that you are protected from sky high uh, late fees, sky high overdraft fees, the activity of debt collectors that would be unsupervised and unregulated by the federal government if they were not doing the work. There's something for everyone to like in that agency. They have a complaint database that people can just, and the earlier question maybe I should have added, make sure that you also file a complaint with with the AG's office, with the Consumer Sentinel, and with the CFPB's complaint database, which has a remarkably high success rate in terms of people settling the problems that they have, of resolving the complaints that they have against particular companies. And that's for anyone who has a complaint. And the businesses don't have to resolve them, but they do because they too want to make sure that they're not inadvertently harming people. And but what Supervisor Lawson-Remer mentioned at the outset and has said again, uh, it is uh, it is the honest, law-abiding businesses who want to do right by their customers who are helped by skillful, robust regulation. They're the ones who will be able to compete and compete on a level playing field, compete fairly, and not have to try to run their business in a fair and honest way when others are not and are getting an advantage that way. So this benefits all of us from the business side and from the consumer side.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that I have, I think is kind of centered for me. Um, I very vividly remember the 2008 financial crisis. I remember the day I woke up and Lehman Brothers had fallen, and I was living in, as I just finished law school. I was working my PhD, living in New York, and soon after went to the Treasury Department. So this is really centered for me as sort of a pivotal moment in our country's history. Um, and then, of course, one of my favorite movies is The Big Short. And just haven't seen it. I'll shill for that movie any day. So I think my question for the panelists is kind of given what's happening in Washington with the gutting of the CFPB, what kind of vacuum does that leave in terms of the kind of harms that the CFPB was designed to confront? And what, if anything, can local governments with a stronger and more robust consumer protection unit do to protect our people here in San Diego County?
So, going back to particular vantage points, I started practicing consumer finance litigation in 2003, right out of law school. And I was in private practice, and I was in a small boutique mission-driven law firm, and our focus was on predatory lending, mortgage lending, and foreclosure prevention and debt collection. We saw people walking through our doors with like holding papers and contracts with the most gimmicky loan products, at least the partners in my firm had seen in their careers. I was relatively new. ever have a mortgage before. But they had been around for a long time doing this work, and they had seen mortgages come in and go. And they were absolutely shocked. And this was like in 2003, not in 2008, at the types of loans that were being extended to people who had very low income, little means, or were financially disadvantaged. And so it was no shock, I think, to like a certain sector of the population that the housing bubble burst and people were going through waves of foreclosure. I think it was a shock how it reverberated across Wall Street and globally and that kind of thing. But that's just to say that the best position that local enforcers have is that you're on the beat and you're on the ground and you can see people walking in with these gimmicky products before anybody wakes up to a New York Times story that Lehman Brothers just crashed. And you're in the best position, to be able to act quickly and to get your, finger on the pulse and to, start to do something about it, both with respect to bringing the enforcement actions and getting the word that this is happening out there, to protecting your county and the individuals who reside there. This is happening again, in my opinion, the proliferation of gimmicky mortgage products and loan products generally, and the way some of these products are structured to circumvent existing mortgage lending laws or usury laws or otherwise is snaking its way through our economy right now, especially in California. Home equity investment loans are a huge issue. Earned wage access are payday loans in another form. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the problems that these expensive, gimmicky problems are going to cause people, including specifically with home equity investment loans. It's just going to take a bunch of people's homes. And it's going to be a minute before we see like the wave of this happening, but it is beginning to happen and being right there on the ground at the county level. You'll be able to see those papers, talk to those individuals, quite frankly, in a way that's difficult for federal and state enforcers that might be a couple of steps removed, from the people and who rely mostly on people coming in and bringing them complaints versus going out in the communities and finding out what's happening.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore the value of local is that being able to your ear to the ground. Those listening mechanisms that you all can have um, are super powerful. And one of the best examples of that is 10 years ago when the LA city attorney uncovered the Wells Fargo scandal. I mean, they were there right when and identified the issue, and he was ready to bring it to the lawsuit himself before the CFPB came and this found that it's actually a much huge problem, but nevertheless, that ability to have a pulse of what's happening, of the kind of fraud that they were engaged in, was super powerful, and he was in a position to do something about it, at least for the people of Los Angeles. And so that's where a unit like this that you create with not only lawyers but other sort of people that can engage with the community to hear what's happening and to get out in front of many of the things that Shennan was talking about that are going to be coming.
And
Thank
getting
you.
your hands on the paperwork that might take
Yes.
longer to trickle up, in an investigation or all of that kind of stuff. Like that's a really powerful tool.
Yes. Subpoena power.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our time. This is a question that my policy team asked me to ask because they're responsible for making sure that this gets implemented correctly. So here's the question. You've all worked inside or alongside enforcement systems at the federal, state, and local levels. We've talked about the real harms to renters, patients, service members, small businesses, and families. And you've also described the limits of some of the enforcement mechanisms that already exist today. So, if you were advising a local official or her policy team, who has the power to vote on whether San Diego should build the civil enforcement capacity, knowing that federal enforcement is retreating and state agencies have to prioritize the biggest statewide cases, and many local harms are falling through the cracks. Um, what advice would you give, and what would you say is at stake?
I
Mike.
would say I think this is one of the most meaningful things that the government can do to protect people, especially right now when there is so much concern about affordability and about our civil rights. Having a unit in government that is close to the people, that can stand up for the people, to fight for them, to fight the unfairness tax, as you said, and to try to fight for their clean air and water, and to try to protect them against discrimination, unlawful discrimination, is extraordinarily powerful thing, and so desperately needed right now. So I guess my advice would just be, um, uh, uh, you know, push hard, and it will grow. I will say, I think it's a great 10 attorneys, 10 investigators is a wonderful place to target to start. But if you have to start smaller, you will be able to grow. Success will be able to build this division. We started a civil rights division. It was one attorney and one. It was two attorneys and a paralegal is where we started, and it's now 25 attorneys and a similar size support staff with 6 investigators, I believe. And so, these it will grow, and it's a very important tool for the people right now.
Thank you. Ted.
I'll say this too, and I think Mike is alluding to it. It matters a lot who those 10 lawyers and 10 investigators are. There's a certain posture that and maybe attitude that people may develop when they're in government service. Sometimes at a county council's office, you're playing defense most of the time. People are suing you. And what you need is someone who's going to be robust, aggressive, thoughtful, visionary, even running this thing. You need someone who really has that track record and that ability to make those sorts of things happen, and to teach folks how things can happen. You can't just assume that someone will figure it out by dint of saying, well, we hired you for an affirmative litigation team, and therefore that's what you'll do. It's actually pretty specialized. It takes a lot of courage. I think that thus far, this effort has shown vision and courage and a real dedication to doing this the right way. And look forward to seeing the development of that team. And I think that the case selection, which is what I think I heard in your question, will actually take care of itself. Make sure that, keep reaching out to people, keep hearing what they care about. And that really will be a really useful guiding star for you in terms of which cases you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
these are all really great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shennan.
I was just going to say, along the lines of what Ted was just talking about, download the CFPB complaint database information for San Diego County as soon as you can, in case it no longer exists next week, because that might be a nice source of information for you. But also, I was just going to say, it takes a village. And I think what you've already been doing with your outreach to people both in California, but nationally, and like your openness to take, advice or to get information, I think is, essential for success. There's a wide, varied, passionate, highly intelligent, bar out there doing this work in all different capacities. And as I've been saying before, the more that we collaborate and, make the quilt and use our tools collectively, the stronger we're going to be as a force. And CLC is always here to support you guys in anything you need. You should feel free to reach out. You know, that's what we are. We're a support center for consumer attorneys. We've been around for 50 years, and it's one of the things I think we love to do the most. And, you know, Ted, I think, probably feels the same way with his students and everything. So I think you guys are off to an incredible start in that regard. And just please keep in touch and attend all the conferences and yeah, especially the new attorneys.
Yeah, no, um, I'll just add that yes, as I mentioned, there's a growing network of these of cities and counties that are doing this, and the opportunity to learn together, so that you're not going at this alone, but they also have a lot of like very tangible advice on, like you said, like Ted said, finding the right kind of attorney, finding the right kind of cases, finding what's the low hanging fruit that you could be starting with to build momentum for your office. Is like all of that is out there. It isn't going to cost you any money.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. I just really appreciate everyone being here. Thank you for those words of advice. And let me just add, kind of to Ted's point about hiring the right people. I could not agree more. We're definitely going to be putting together, a community and technical advisory panel to sort of advise on how this office gets off the ground, and to support with some of the initial hiring decisions that I think are going to be like really, really critical in making sure we get the right folks in. So, if this passes, my board in the next month or so, fingers crossed, we will certainly be reaching out and would love to have your expertise and your wisdom as we look for the fierce and fearless director of our Consumer Fairness and Public Protection Unit for San Diego County. So again, thank you all. I thank all of you so much for the work that you do, and fighting this fight every single day. I'm really hopeful that we're going to be able to stand up a really robust and really effective Consumer Fairness and Public Protection Unit in San Diego County to fight for working families, to fight for people who are getting left out, who are being left behind, who are being victimized by scams and predatory practices and pollution and plastics and waste being dumped in our backyards. And I think we all deserve better than that, and the businesses that play by the rules deserve better than that too. And I think it's high time that we step into this breach. So just again, thank you guys. Thank all of you for the work you do and also for all of your advice as we've formulated and put this together. And I hope that you continue staying involved and help us find some great people to lead the charge. So. Thank you all. And thank you to the audience who tuned in. I know there were some questions we didn't have a chance to get to. There's a lot of great questions. So I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm and participation and, the time you took out of your day to be here tonight. And please be in touch with my team in my office. If you would like us to get back to you on a specific question that was not addressed, we'll do our best to follow up. Just reach out at the same email that you received the invitation through, and we'll do everything we can to get back to you. And again, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you again for having us.
Okay. Good
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.